2023 6th District PTA President, and I really appreciate you joining us this evening for our special speaker. I am going to turn it over to our EVP, Kelly Cree. She is also serving as our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair, and she will introduce you to our program tonight. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Kelly?
Thank you, Linda. My name is Kelly Cree, and I use the pronouns she and her. I'm the Executive Vice President and the Chairperson of the DEI Committee at 6th District PTA, as Linda said. 6th District PTA is made up of PTAs in Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties. We are one of 27 PTA districts in California State PTA. Chartered in 1916, 6th District PTA serves approximately 210 PTA units. Most of our units are in our 9 PTA councils: Cupertino, Fremont, Sunnyvale, Evergreen, Los Altos, Mountain View, Milpitas Unified, Monterey Bay, North Valley, Palo Alto, San Jose Unified, and Santa Clara Unified. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This presentation is being recorded and will be shared with those who have registered for the meeting. Please mute your connection. If you have any questions, please submit using the Q&A button. We sent out this afternoon around 6 o'clock an update to the slides, and those are the slides that we'll be using. The earlier set of slides has been updated. Tonight, I am proud to welcome Shereen Walter, President-elect of the California State PTA, to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion basics for PTAs and how to incorporate DEI principles into your PTA. Shereen has been involved with PTA for over 25 years, becoming involved for the same reason that many parents do, to make a difference at her own child's school. She has found a passion for helping all children and families in California with her work as the Community Concerns Advocate, VP of Health and Community Concerns, and Director of Legislation for the California State PTA. She strongly believes that local PTA leaders are the backbone of the organization and will continue to enhance the work of our state leaders in supporting them in her upcoming term as the state president. Welcome, Shereen. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us this evening.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you guys for having me. Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you taking time out of your valuable evening to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you, everybody. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So Linda, do you want to flip to the next slide? So I really like this picture from National PTA with all the hands. When I first saw it, I actually thought it was flowers. An organization that recognizes diversity values differences and similarities amongst people through its actions and accountability. These characteristics include age, ethnicity, gender, language and culture, socioeconomic status, and other things. I don't know about you guys, but as I was looking at that list, there's things that are clearly missing. I don't actually know if our chat is working. So if the chat is working, you guys could throw some things in the chat. But the things that pop out at me are ableism, sexual orientation. They say gender, but I think about gender identity. So I think there are some things missing in here. And I think it's important to remember that there's all kinds of differences and similarities amongst people. And I think socioeconomic can be a strong one, that status. Okay, so next slide. When PTAs respect the differences, but acknowledge the commonalities in their communities, they can develop priorities based on that knowledge and genuinely represent your communities. So when you represent your community, what you do, when you make people feel welcome and a part of your community, what you do is you gain strength and help to meet some of your objectives because you have an increased number of volunteers and resources that support you. And that happens by really making a priority of including people. So next slide. I think this next slide is probably the most important one, and that's that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just the work of like a diversity and equity or a DEI committee. It really needs to be the work of everyone. It just can't be a small group of individuals. It needs to be the focus of every member of your organization that decides they want to serve the families and the children in your community. So it's super important that it's not just something that's a passion of a few people. It really needs to be embedded in the work done by everyone. So change the slide. So diversity is the representation of and respect for people from different backgrounds and identities. So I'm going to call out a few things that show that we embody and live with this belief. We believe in and embody diversity as leaders and staff when we acknowledge and appreciate individual ideas, their knowledge, their values, all of those that are different than our own. That we seek out and learn from diverse sets of perspectives, skills, and experiences, staying open to the unfamiliar and sometimes uncomfortable when things are different than what you're used to. That we actively recruit and elect leaders who represent the school community that they serve. So your board shouldn't be different in composition to your community. It really should be reflective of your community. We embody and live diversity when we support units from less represented and resourced areas. So I think those are ways that we show that we care about diversity. So the next slide is about equity. So equity is when we provide fairness in resources, opportunities, and outcomes so that all communities get what they need to be engaged and successful. I know you've all seen the video of the kids standing and looking over the fence, and they all have the exact equal resources. The tall one sees over, but the short ones don't when the box is the same height. So this kind of applies to that. So if you want to embody and live with equity, here's some of the ways that you would show that you live this value. You prioritize and advocate for innovative and sustainable solutions that work for a diverse range of children and their families, especially those that are underrepresented or marginalized in our communities. You persist in the face of challenges, and we hold ourselves and partners accountable. Those partners can be our other educators, education leaders, and policymakers. We recognize and address bias and privilege. When you are recognizing and addressing bias and privilege, you're really looking to advance equity. You understand and attend to specific individual and community needs, providing additional resources to those with the greatest needs. That's about providing equity. So let's talk about inclusion. Inclusion is actions and behaviors and social norms that ensure that all people feel they're safe, welcomed, and that they belong. That means putting diversity into action with intentionality, ensuring that everybody feels respected, supported, and valued, and that they can participate with an equal right to be heard and with some equal power sharing. Super important for inclusion. So to embody and live this belief, the things that we should be doing are working cooperatively and respectfully with colleagues with different roles, goals, and approaches. Not everybody in a diverse and inclusive environment is going to think the same and approach things the same. We engage in a diverse range of voices and lived experiences from members or prospective members and seek to meet individuals and communities where they are. Not everybody has the same opportunities for training or learning or have had the opportunity to have a number of jobs like some have. So that's especially important. We really want to be paying attention to those who are traditionally underrepresented from our communities. We want to be soliciting the input from our school community, incorporating it in visible and meaningful ways, and sharing credit. But beyond just getting their input, we really want them to be involved. We really want them to be involved in the decision-making process. We want to account, this is an unusual one, but we want to account for cultural status and power dynamics that happen in relationships. Sometimes they're subtle and we don't even know that they exist. But those power dynamics can prevent people from feeling included and valued. So we want to set up a level playing field for everybody to engage in the work. So I'm going to give you an example of inclusion. that I think about. It's not when you think about traditionally DE&I, this might not be what you're thinking about. Do you want to go to the next slide, Linda? So this is a slide that comes from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And, it's not uncommon that PTAs used to have muffins for mom and donuts with dads. This kind of lack of understanding of how this impacts and how people feel in terms of being included is something that we shouldn't overlook. I just read a story today about a young girl whose aunt was subbing in at Donuts for Dads because the young girl didn't have a dad. And she was super excited that her aunt was coming. And when her aunt showed up, she was all excited until they got inside. And the other kids were all sitting there with their dads, and she was there with her aunt who, moments before she was excited about. But in those moments, she realized she missed her dad. She wasn't there with her dad. She felt different than the rest of the kids. So I think we need to think about how kids feel in those circumstances. So here's some very creative things that you could do: donuts with grown-ups, muffins in the morning, breakfast with buddies, pancakes with pals, coffee with cardinals. I think that only works if your what do you call it? Your mascot is cardinal. But I think that you could come up with something creative that goes with the mascot of your school. But these are great ways to make sure that you're incorporating all kinds of families. There can be families with two parents of the same sex. There are going to be adopted parents. There's going to be grandparents. There's going to be guardians. There's going to be all kinds of parents. And so being respectful that not everybody comes from a traditional mom and dad family anymore. So that's just a good example of inclusion. Okay, so how might you get started at your council, your unit, or your district? And so I want to talk you through that a little bit. We've done this step at the California State PTA with our board of directors and our board of managers, and I think it was a really eye-opening step. So how we're going to get started is, number one, you need to name diversity, equity, and inclusion as a strategic priority. If it's not a priority, it doesn't get done. We all know how that is, right? If it's not something that you're thinking about or is on your mind all the time, you're not going to get to it because other things will get in the way. You want to identify DE&I champions at the leadership level. So you want to identify as many of those as you can. You want to open an authentic and ongoing dialogue about DE&I work. And sometimes those conversations are going to be tough because people feel judged, people feel awkward. There's a lot of things that happen, but those conversations need to be open and authentic. And you want to start looking at your data. So you may not know where your PTA is on your DE&I path. And I think it's important for us to kind of figure out exactly where we are on that journey so that we know where we're going next. So naming it as a priority means defining and communicating how diversity, equity, and inclusion helps PTA achieve its mission. So how does it help us achieve our mission? It helps us, what's the California State PTA mission to, oh my God, this is going to be really bad that I can't say it off the top of my head, but it's because I'm nervous. Sorry about that. But what we're trying to do is look out for families and children. And we can't do that unless we're really including all families and all children. And when we involve our entire communities, that means we get our entire community involved in supporting our PTA, and that helps us with our mission. The more you connect the reasons why you do the work to your mission, your visions, and your strategies, the more critically important everyone will understand that it is. Local volunteers are critical to your DE&I journey. Like I said, it's not just one person. It has to be everybody. DE&I champions can do a really good job of encouraging others to engage in the work by speaking to it and modeling it. A kind of example is we're working on our training for this summer, a group of us on an emerging leader task force. And somebody said, well, we should have an application. And right away, for me, an application can be an impediment to people. And so we want to really think about those things. We want to be open and authentic about that dialogue, and we want to start looking at the data. The only way to get a clear picture of the inequities and gaps is to review our membership activities, our programs and policies, and collect and examine our relevant data. Like, do you know who's in your community? Do you know what the language is spoken? Do you know where people come from, their ethnicities, where they're from, what the family makeups are? You know, what do you know about your community? And then looking at your board, are you reflective of that community? Do your activities, I come from a middle school that actually had very high income and very low income population. And it was mostly high income people who were on the PTA board, and they thought that the best thing in the world was to have the auction at the local country club. Well, the problem with that auction at a local country club is it leaves out 50% of your community. And so you really want to be looking at what your activities are, both for membership and for programs that you have for your kids. And then holding yourself and your PTA membership and leadership accountable for DE&I. So it's kind of an ongoing process. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Linda. There's a DE&I rubric that is on the National PTA website. As a matter of fact, the National PTA has the most excellent resources in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I encourage all of you to go on to, it's just www.pta.org, and just type in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and just look around on their website. The stuff that they have is tremendous. But one of the really useful tools they have there is a DE&I rubric, where what you do is you assess where are you and where are you headed on your DE&I journey. So they've got rubrics in the areas of membership, programs, advocacy, and governance and leadership. So I'm going to just kind of, I have it in front of me here, but I'm going to read through kind of how this works by using the membership rubric, because I think it's really valuable. So there's 4 columns. There's a beginning, there's an emerging, there's an intermediate, and there's an advanced. So the idea is to kind of read through these things and kind of get a feel for where you are and where you're going. So for instance, in the beginning category, it says, are not aware that dominant groups, i.e. white, English only speaking, middle class, straight, Christian, etc., have power in the PTA. So are you aware that those are the only people that have power in your PTA? Membership is not representative of the community served. Is your leadership or your membership of your PTA representative of your community? These are not judgmental, and they're not meant to be judgmental. They're meant to be a serious discussion and assessment of where you really are. You haven't determined which demographic groups are missing from membership and the barriers keeping them from being engaged. Have you done that? So if you read those descriptions, you'd go, well, are we in the beginning category, or are those things kind of covered for us? And then you look at the emerging category. You are aware that there are dominant groups that exist in the PTA culture, but you expect people to adhere to dominant organization norms. So not everybody is white, Christian, middle class, but you expect everybody to adopt those same norms. Is that where you're at? And there's nothing wrong with that being where you're at. One of my favorite mottos I was mentioning to Linda earlier is, when you know better, you do better. And so, that's the emerging category. So you're on the way to emerging. Membership is not yet representative of the community served, though some progress has been made. So these are really great rubrics to just kind of look where you're at, and they help you to see where you want to be going. So I really encourage you guys to use that. And then once you've done the rubric for each area, like membership, they have some reflection questions. And I think those are really useful for everybody to sit down and put where they think we are on the rubric. So as your board, you sit down and you put where you think you are in this rubric, and then you talk about some of these reflection questions, which are, which stage is your PTA when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are you beginning? Are you emerging? Are you intermediate? What is one thing that you want to focus on to improve DE&I in your membership efforts? So of course, I'm looking at the membership rubric, and so that it's asking about membership. So what's just one thing that you would want to do to really improve DE&I in your membership outreach? So I think those are valuable questions to help bump you along on your membership rubric, on your membership journey, on your DE&I journey. So let's talk about some next steps after you've completed the assessment. So you've gotten the assessment off of the National PTA website. As a board, you've sat down and you've looked at where are you in your programs? Where are you in your membership? Where are you in your leadership? So you identify the key findings, analyzing each section of the assessment. What patterns or trends do you notice? Are there glaring inequities? What is surprising or noteworthy? I think that's always interesting. What's surprising and noteworthy? What didn't you think about? What recommendations, make recommendations for action and change? So make one or more recommendations for each section to improve practice and advance equity. So the beauty of that is you can even start with the simple, I call it the low-hanging fruit, the really simple things that you can do right now. And then there are going to be some things that are a little bit more long-term. And that's okay. That's all good. That all is bumping you along on your journey. It's a good opportunity to engage more community members, both internal and external. You know, do you want to ask staff, members of your community to join you on doing the rubric? That would be, I think, incredibly powerful, because you might view things one way and others around you might view it another way. Communicate and partner with other diversity groups. There are other diversity groups out there that could really help you along on your journey. So prioritizing what to work on. What recommendations do you need to focus on the most in order to be in greater alignment with your mission, vision, and commitment to the values of equity and inclusion? And then you want to develop some concrete goals. The best goals are SMART goals. I always say that, long story, I'll tell you guys sometime when I see you in person. But the best kind of goals are SMART goals. And those are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And that's the best kind of goal. I have a goal, which is to invite people to do things more. For some reason, that's not a strong point of mine. So I say, oh, I'm going to just do that more. Well, guess what? You know, and I don't accomplish that as much as if I tell myself this week, I'm going to invite 2 people to do something. It's much more concrete. It's measurable, attainable, realistic, and it's time-bound. So that's how you would use a SMART goal. Look for some easy opportunities. So here I am with the low-hanging fruit to start moving things forward, and then develop a realistic work plan. And you want to get everybody's buy-in. So the best way to develop a plan like this is not just one small group, but with your entire board, or even with all those in your membership who are interested. So for each goal, what needs to be done, who's going to do it, and by when. Engage a lot of people in the work, as many as you can. And invest people in the work. So if just a few people are doing it, the people aren't invested in it. So you want to invest as many people as you can. You want to try and build a growing culture of learning and action on equity and inclusion. We were talking about this earlier before you guys got on, that there is this whole culture of learning. Right now, we're learning that the word stakeholder is a word that we don't use, that it's very offensive to Native American communities. And so once you know that, then you're more conscientious of not using it in situations. So we want to have a culture of learning and action and change. Evaluate your progress and celebrate successes. So you make a plan to track, document, and celebrate your progress and your successes, because I think that's an important part of evaluating how you're doing. You want to continue to learn, build on, and sustain your success. So you want to turn practices that are worthwhile and successful into ongoing protocols and policies. We all know that, you know, things change as boards turn over. So you want to put things in place that will happen after you're gone and will become ongoing protocols for your unit, your council, your district. You want to develop infrastructure, communication channels, funding, staffing, and other supports to keep expanding and sustaining the equity work. And you want to institutionalize equity. You want to make it both aspirational and an operational framework for your daily and ongoing work. So D&I, when it's done right, it's not D&I as a separate thing that sits over here and it's something that you do. it's embedded in everything you do. A little bit, I think about schools. It's a little bit like reading. Reading isn't necessarily a separate thing you do. It's part of everything you do. It's part of word problems in math. It's part of your science. That's how D&I is. It should be embedded in everything that you do, a little bit like reading. So how do you welcome diverse perspectives into your PTA? So you want to celebrate diversity. You want to break down barriers that discourage people or minimize their involvement. You want to learn more about the community your PTA is serving. You want to ask and you want to listen. So you don't want to just ask, you want to actually listen. And when you ask and listen, you also want to make changes that are responsive to the needs of your community and the wishes of your community. Because if all you do is ask and then no change happens, then it's kind of a moot point. Do not stick a leader in a rut of always being the translator or the mediator. Sometimes this happens when you've got, one leader, let's say in your community, who can speak Spanish, and then they become the translator for everybody, and they become the person who translates the newsletter and does the mediating when you have any issues, or translates verbally. And that's a lot of pressure on one person. So you really want to do everything that you can to welcome people with diverse languages in a more effective way than just having them be the token translator. Bring culturally diverse speakers and performers to events and assemblies. This is a really important one. And, there's nothing better than doing an evening that's welcomes everybody's culture, and recognizes everybody's culture, different foods, different presentations, different dancers. Assemblies can highlight different communities that are part of your community. So those are all important things that you could do. So those are great ways to welcome diverse perspectives into your PTA. Don't assume that you're in a position of trust because you're a PTA leader. I think that's a strong one. Do work on building meaningful relationships with families and community members. A great way to do that is not always to be expecting your communities and families to be coming to where you are. What about going into your community to events that are being put on within your community and meeting people and being there? So I want everybody to think seriously about how you're including your community, but how you're getting to know your community. And sometimes the best way to do that is outside of your environment, in their environment. Don't approach families about the benefits of PTA membership without knowing their needs. I think we sometimes do this. This is why you should be a PTA member. This is what it does for you, without really knowing what people's needs are. And so I think it's really important to be asking your community what they need from PTA. What are their hopes from PTA? How can PTA help them be more connected to the school and their children be more successful? Everybody wants that. Consider alternative meeting times and locations. Maybe some people can't make it all the way back to the school at night. Maybe you could meet in a community center where there are more community members who aren't typical PTA members who live around there. So consider alternative times and locations. So here's some other outreach tips. Try to use the languages that are represented within your community at your meetings and in your communications. That happened to me once when I was a young PTA president. I always had a Spanish translator at my meetings and always put out my meeting flyers in Spanish, and always had the translator there. And one night my translator called sick, and I had a family, mom, dad, and the son show up, and all I could do was greet them. It was the most disconcerting thing for me ever, because I wanted them to be there and yet I couldn't incorporate them in any meaningful way. So think about how you're going to do that. So that was kind of bad. Understand that everyone has value. Work to build representative leadership and voice within your PTA from all community groups. The makeup of your board members, as I said before, should really be reflective of your community. Include students, teachers, community, and extended family members. Sometimes the most helpful and most wonderful PTA volunteers and our extended family members, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles. Assess your outreach success regularly. Are there new board members and new members at your meetings that represent all parts of your communities, or is it just the same people who show up every year? So now I have sort of a slight change of tact. I came across this great blog post that was written by the California State PTA Leadership Services and Family Engagement Commission. And it's titled 6 Ways to Fix the Everyone Welcome sign on your PTA. So the question is, do you have a welcome sign on your PTA? And how do you make sure that it's welcoming? So one idea is to create a welcoming committee. And the story that they have in this blog really strikes me because I've seen it happen. And that's that, the new kindergarten mom shows up at the first PTA meeting because she's told there's a PTA meeting. And all the regular PTA members are already in, they're sitting there talking to their friends, and she comes in, nobody greets her, nobody has on name tags, nobody says hello and makes her feel welcome. And then, the first thing that you do in September, at least in my unit, used to be you start going over the budget. And you start talking about the budget. Okay, we've got $5,000 for the Whale Tales program. We've got $4,000 for accelerated reader, or, and the poor new people who have never heard of these programs, don't know what they are, don't know what the acronyms are, feel more and more alienated. So you really need to be conscientious of, have a greeter, have somebody assigned as a greeter to greet every newcomer at a meeting. Don't sit in your typical groups, when you, and I know we all want to, we show up at a meeting and there's Kelly that you haven't seen in a while and you want to sit down, you want to talk to her. Really resist that urge and sit with somebody new, make them feel welcome, ask them what they're interested in doing, ask them how they'd like to become involved. Wear name tags. Name tags are always helpful because then they can get to know what your names are. Avoid using acronyms or jargon. We all love LCAP, LCFF, all of these things that aren't meaningful to somebody who's brand new. Follow up with new attendees after the meeting to ask them, do they heard in the meeting? Do they have any ideas on how they can help? Do you have some ideas on something that maybe you would offer them or that they might be interested in? So number 2 is recruit everyone. So never lose a recruiting opportunity. So you're setting up for your back to school night and you and your couple of friends are carrying the stuff across the playground to set up for the back to school night. And there's some moms on the kindergarten playground. Instead of waving and saying hello, how about, hi, I'm, Shereen Walter. I'm from the PTA. We're having a back to school night tonight. Are you guys interested in helping out with PTA? Make people feel welcome. Let them know that you want them. Consider every meeting with a new family, an opportunity to talk about what your PTA does and invite them to get involved. So I think that's important. Be available. Sometimes PTAs don't communicate well with parents, and there's not an officer list on the bulletin board or on the website or in the newsletter. Parents don't know who runs the PTA or how to contact them. And that's a very alienating feeling if you're interested in becoming involved and you don't even know who's in charge or how you would contact them. So being unavailable like that makes groups feel exclusive, as if members don't want to share the information because they aren't looking for help. So keep your website updated with each officer's contact information. Make sure your contact information is linked to the school website. And make sure that the school office and school administrators have, all officers' emails, phone numbers, and contact information so that you guys can be contacted if parents are interested in being involved with PTA. Always follow up. So how in the beginning, first day packet, there might be a, are you interested in volunteering survey? And you dutifully as a new parent, fill out that survey. I'm interested in all these things, and you never get a call. We want to make sure that you follow up. So if you put one of those out, a survey, you want to make sure that if somebody offers to help and they're not contacted, they feel like they've been rejected. It's a key to them feeling like PTAs are cliquey and that it's a cliquey culture, and it just breeds resentment and negativity. And it'll make them sort of sour on the PTA and probably their friend group. So a way to fix it is being diligent at not only asking for help, but actually using it. So when somebody fills that out, contact them, see if you can find a slot for them to volunteer. Try an online volunteer sign up or management system. Those can be quite helpful at giving people the opportunity to sign up easily, because it's all about making it easy for parents to participate. So think of ways that you can make it easy and small bites for parents to participate. We also do remind you that membership doesn't equate to volunteering. So we still want people to be members even if they don't volunteer, but we really want to encourage everybody to become part of the PTA and to feel like they can belong and volunteer. So include new people in decision-making and leadership roles. When some people have been in office for years, newcomers don't feel like they're wanted. They also don't feel like they could bring enough to the table. Oh my God, I can never have all the experience that Shereen has as PTA president. So, you know, I could never do a job like that. That's not how we want people to feel. We want people to feel like they can do a job. And so by not sharing information about volunteer openings, sometimes people might feel excluded. So we want to be saying, you know, come February, we're going to put out an interest survey. We're going to have a nominating committee. These are the officers that we're going to fill. The president is going to appoint committee chairs. Here's when that happens. Here's how you could get considered. We want to make people feel like it's not a mystery. They don't have to beg to be involved, that we're continuing to offer them information and opportunities that they can belong. So use committees as a great way to ease volunteers in. You know, you don't, this did happen to me, maybe it's happened to you guys, where you're a kindergarten mom and you walk in the door and you're suddenly the financial secretary, and the next year you're the president. That's intimidating to a lot of people. It's the little safer way is to have somebody be part of a committee, you know, have them be part of the back to school night gathering, or part of the family dinner night planning, or working a booth at family dinner night. You know, you don't always have to make people jump in with both feet first. So allow them to ease into learning about the PTA and allow them places where they can engage. Keep them informed by maybe providing job descriptions, reminding them what jobs are out there. And as I said, include a timeline. So build diversity. You've held the same event for years, run by the same people. So in my school, that was family dinner night. It's a great big auction. It's a dinner that people have to pay for, and then you pay for tickets to play games. It's intended to be a fundraiser. When I was president, I said, let's evaluate our budget. Have we made enough money in our early fundraisers in the year that we can provide all the programs we need to? And do we really need to have this? So let's change it up. Let's make it a free dinner for everybody who wants to come. And let's make the games free. And let's not do the auction. I got vetoed on the auction because people love the auction, but we didn't charge for the games. We didn't charge for the dinner. And that really allowed people from all throughout our community to become involved and to attend. So make sure you change up events. You look at events that people can become involved in. A multicultural fair is something that people can all do together. So when different voices aren't included in the planning and execution of an event, ideals can get stale and only appeal to a small group. So you want to really be listening to people and getting everybody's ideas and trying them. Take notice of parents who don't usually get involved. Talk with them, personally invite them to share opinions and join committees. Make sure you have wide representation on your board and your committees of parents from different grade levels who belong in different activities, you know, the sports group, the theater group, caregivers who may not be parents, those who speak different languages. And don't be satisfied with just contacting one member of a group. So you have a whole Asian community and you find one member and you get them to be included. You know, that you don't want to be satisfied with that. You want to get lots of members. You want to invite lots of them. Encourage them to invite their friends. That's how you really engage your whole community. So here's my takeaways. Remind officers to socialize outside of their officer circle at meetings and school events. Have a greeter at your door of events to make newcomers feel welcome. Use name tags so that newcomers will know better who's who. Always explain business items and acronyms, even if they're a holdover from previous meetings. Don't presume everybody knows what they are. Make people raise their hands. I thought this was an unusual one, but I think it's important because it keeps just the one group from always talking, because everybody has to be recognized, and hopefully the chair will call on everybody. Set up simple ways for everyone to get involved, make it easy for volunteers to see what type of help is needed along with specific time slots, and make it easy for them to sign up and do it. Include current PTA leader contact information and planned events on the page on your website, on social media accounts, and consider adding a brief job description for officers and committee chairs on your website, just so people see what jobs are out there. So I just want to kind of end up just talking a little bit about race and injustice in America. It's not all about just wearing a name tag. There are some serious systemic issues in our schools and in our country. So National PTA has a National PTA initiative called the Center for Family Engagement. And they have a section called How to Talk About Race and Injustice in America. These are some of the resources that are there. Educating yourself about systemic racism, talking about race with children, how to talk about racial justice with families in your community. These are all important things that we all shouldn't be shy of, and that's going to help us have communities that are more blended together and recognize the inequities that exist. Race and bias affect everyone. Talking about racial disparities and experience with our children and in our school communities is difficult, but it's important work. People across the country are educating themselves about how to create more inclusive and explicitly anti-racist environments for families and children to thrive. So when I was the director of legislation, which was a year and a half ago, we actually started a monthly book club within the legislation committee where we started reading books about race. So How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility, The Color of Law. We read a whole lot of books that had to do with race in America. And I think it was really important for us. It was important for us to see these perspectives, to talk about them. I think that we all felt that it really broadened our knowledge and our experience about what is going on and has gone on, and what our marginalized communities are up against. And I think that sometimes we're really unaware of that. And so those are important things to do. So next page is some other resources, and this will be in the handouts that you guys will get. And these are live links in that, I believe. And if not, I can send them to you guys. But these are all National PTA resources. The PTA Local Leader Guidance for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that second bullet point, that's where the rubric is for evaluating where you are on the DE&I scale. Oh, there, she's got it right there. Oh, thank you. You are awesome. So this is the one that I was reading for you guys with the 4 columns of beginning, emerging, intermediate, and advanced. So this is in that PTA Local Leader Guidance for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and it is a really great document. They have How to Talk About Race and Justice in America. They have a whole bunch of really relevant podcasts. Our family engagement person would wring my neck if I didn't mention that the national standards for family school partnerships has recently been updated by National PTA and has a lot of good stuff about how to really integrate families into your school community. So I really encourage you guys to bump around quite a bit on the National PTA website because there's some great stuff. They also have a cultural calendar on there, which is really good. That a big mistake I made my very first year as a PTA president was planning a family dinner night on Rosh Hashanah, because I didn't see a calendar I didn't know existed. Now I know better, I do better. But a cultural calendar helps you to really pay attention to what kind of things could be in conflict with you. So that's the National PTA resources. I have another page of some other resources. There's a great resource called Race Forward, Racial Equity Readiness Assessment Tool. It's a little bit similar to the rubric that National PTA has. National PTA's, I think, is a little better, but it's a good one. Common Sense Media has some great resources about race and racism. They're an allied agency of the California State PTA. And California State PTA has something on our website called Inclusions All Year Long. So those are things that you can do every month, which I love. Nice practical things. So I've talked you guys' ears off. Now I want to know if you have any questions or anything that wasn't clear or that you wanted to follow up on, or for my learning that you wanted to call me out on. So
We don't have any questions in the chat.
okay.
Or there was only one question about showing you where Shereen was reading from, and that is in that national PTA resource.
Yeah, that's a great resource. And this is the resource that state PTA actually used when we did our assessment of where we're at with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was very eye-opening. And we took a lot of little steps, and we have a lot more steps to go. And I think that's important to admit that, know that, and to work on it. But that resource, again, is the PTA Local Leader Guide for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And if for some reason you can't find it, I'm really easy to email because I'm just swalter@capta.org. You can email me any questions you have, or if you need a resource that I've mentioned that somehow the link doesn't work, or you want me to send you something, feel free to email me any of your questions. But I think the most exciting thing about DE&I is to just remember that it's a continuum, and that, you know, everybody, every unit, every council, every district starts at a different place along that continuum. And the important thing is to evaluate where you are on that continuum and where you want to go next, and to make conscientious efforts to go there and to do that. So I think that's really important.
So we have some comments. One is, thank you for sharing the point about stakeholders. Some of the synonyms that are encouraged to use were collaborators or interested parties. That was something that was a new learning, and you're right, now we can do better.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. And we want to celebrate holidays that are important to different ethnic/cultural groups. How do we navigate the religious or religious adjunct events?
I think that's really important, Linda. And I think this is where you, if you establish relationships with members of your community, this is a great thing to sit down at a table and discuss and figure out how to be culturally responsive to everyone. And yet, so I wouldn't presume to know how to do that. I think the best way to really learn how to do that is to actually work together with a group of people from your diverse communities and talk about how that's going to look.
Sure.
I like that it was a lot in a short amount of time. Yeah, I apologize. And I'm also a super fast talker, so I'm sorry about that.
Is there a reason state PTA uses DEI and not DEIB or JEDI?
We are starting to use JEDI quite a bit, but I didn't want to, because I thought that this was a little bit more of a jumping off presentation. I didn't want to get too far into the justice aspect of it, because I think that's kind of like the next step. But it's definitely at state PTA, we work on that a lot. And when I was director of Ledge, our thing was an equity agenda for children. And that was what we brought to our legislators, and it was what we put out to all our delegates. And it is super important. So it's not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't originally in this presentation. And since it's already a big presentation, I didn't include it here. But for those that don't know, JEDI is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I have to admit that I've never heard the B. So see, here is my chance to learn.
Marcy, do you want to type that in, please? DEIB?
Yeah, thank you, Marcy. I'd like that. And Jill, what data should we evaluate? Is it from the district or our membership? A lot of the info is kept private from us. I would say that you can look at your school report card online, and those school report cards that are online for every school tells you what the makeup of your school community is. In a lot of ways, it's broken out that way. And then you can evaluate who is in your PTA, who's in your leadership, who's in your membership. So a lot of that is observable. Some of it is specific data, but I would definitely be looking at the makeup of your school community and evaluating how your leadership looks in comparison to that. Oh, belonging. I like that. Thank you, Marcy. I appreciate that. That's the first time I've ever heard that, and it's super important. And I think that's what I was getting at when I was talking about how to make sure you have that welcome sign actually hung on your PTA, is sort of that belonging, making sure that people feel like they belong, and that's everybody.
And just to make sure everybody knows, DEIB is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Thank you for that, Marcy. Would I suggest sending out a site-wide survey to parents to see why they are not joining the PTA and go from there? I would, not plan for this response, but I could tell you that my initial reaction to that is why they're not. Seems like a really negative approach. You might, and you might be shocked at the information you find, but I think a better way to maybe survey people is, what are some ways that they could feel included? How can PTA include them and involve them? So I would ask questions of my school community that are actually, what are some things that we can do to get you involved and to have you be involved? Not what, it's just a difference in the verbiage, I realize. But for me, the why are you not joining is like, there's something wrong with you because you're not joining. So, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting out a survey. You could even use that rubric from National PTA and invite anybody who's interested in participating and filling it out and discussing it to be part of your committee that looks at and evaluates where you are and where you need to go. Because, you know, if you did it with just, let's just pretend for a second that you had a very white Christian middle income, mostly female board, and then you had a wider community that was different from that, the answers might be quite different when they come from just your board to the wider community, and it might be very eye-opening. So I think it's the more people that you can include, as we said, that when you're working on DE&I, you don't want it to just be a DE&I committee. It's awesome to have a DE&I committee because it does keep it front and center, but it has to be the role of everybody. And so I also think sort of evaluating it and talking about it and knowing where you're going should be a joint effort of everybody who's interested. Yeah, I agree with Christina. Thank you for emphasizing that DE&I is a continuing, it is a long distance goal. And it's an important goal, and it's an important goal because at the end of the day, it's our kids that need to be included, embraced, accepted. And that, as part of that, comes with their families being involved, because that's the most important thing that we all know as PTA leaders, is that involved parents make a huge difference to the education and success of children. And so we want to get as many people involved as possible. So nice that I've been able to spend the evening with you guys. I really appreciate it. It's a fun topic, and it's an interesting one, and sometimes it's a hard topic. And I don't think any of us are perfect at it, but we just need to keep moving forward and doing things that make us better and better and better, and that make us more inclusive, more accepting, promote more belonging, promote more diversity, hear more diverse voices, are all super important things for us to be doing.
Does anybody have any more questions for Shereen? It's been a wonderful evening. We're almost at 8 o'clock. There aren't any questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in. I feel very fortunate that we have Shereen with us tonight. So thank you, Shereen.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. There's nothing more fun than being able to be with local leaders. As they said in my bio, I think that it's so important. You guys are like the kingpins, linchpins of what happens, because the success of PTA is really at the school site. And so you guys are the most important thing. And so it's really important for we as PTA leaders to be thinking continually about how we support you. So I'm thrilled to be able to be here, and I'd love to support you guys in any way that I can.
Then thank you for joining us tonight.